Terrorism update now. There's a gear shift. In this terrorism update...
It's only a gear shift, thanks to the sensible precautions that were taken by the British security services.
A good point, Andy. Good point. A report came out this week that Americans are as likely to be killed by their own furniture as terrorism. Now, that's a sentence which needs no explanation, but let's give it one anyway. But first, let's repeat it. Americans are as likely to be killed by their own furniture as terrorism. A striking sentence, Andy, but what does it mean? Does that show a fall in the cases of terrorism or a rise in the cases of killer furniture? Let's explain. The statistic comes from a 2011 report from the National Counter-Terrorism Centre, which is the US government's best statistical analysis of terrorism trends throughout its worldwide incidents tracking system. So this report is not a joke. Unfortunately, its conclusion does sound a lot like one, because it states that the number of US citizens that is, not people working in the military or for government groups abroad, who died in terrorist attacks increased by 2 between 2010 and 2011, while, and I quote, a comparable number of Americans are crushed to death by their televisions or furniture each year. Are we absolutely sure that this furniture isn't being trained by terrorists to launch those attacks, Andy? Is Bob's Furniture Warehouse anything more than a terrorist training camp for radicalised couches? Perhaps it's time that we flew some armchairs, some coffee tables and some French dressers down to Guantanamo Bay, Andy, to get some fucking answers out of them. Oh, you won't talk, will you, coffee table? Well, how about I just leave this glass of water on you without a fucking coaster and see if that jogs your memory? Sure, Liberals are going to say that's torture, Andy, and that America should not be lowering itself to engaging in that kind of behaviour. But this country is at war and desperate times call for desperate measures.
You've clearly seen Jack Bauer furniture shopping in IKEA. One report that I found said that there were 176 annual fatalities from falling televisions. Mm-hmm. So it just shows that death can be caused by metaphor as well as physics. And that the Reaper can get you with symbolism as well as embolism. It is truly extraordinary. There were 150,000 murders in America over the last 10 years, which means that you've been 630 times more likely to be killed by someone without a political motive as with a political motive. And that just shows how deeply rooted apathy has become, John. I think this is a shame. I think we need to be training our murderers to be killing people for a cause. And you're also almost 2,000 times more likely to die in a road accident than who has been supplying all the oil that powers those cars. That's right, it's the Bin Laden family, the oil magnates from Saudi Arabia. And roughly you are 100,000 times more likely as an American to be assassinated by your own lifestyle choices as by a terrorist. Now, if only cigarettes and hamburgers had big beards and released occasional threatening videos, we might take their threats to our way of life and death a little more seriously. And you are still more likely to be run over and killed by a horse-drawn cart than by a terrorist. That is a fact. Also more likely to be killed doing an over-enthusiastic Beyoncé impression near a large domestic freezer, or explaining to inattentive schoolchildren how Joan of Arc died, or getting over-competitive in a who can put their tie on fastest race than you are by a terrorist. Now, those are facts, John. False facts, but facts nonetheless. And this is another fact. In the year 2000, I quote, ignition or melting of nightwear caused 9 deaths in America. And that is even before LMFAO released I'm Sexy and I Know.
This was the statistic in the report, though, which, though perhaps unsurprising, was still, I think, pretty horrifying. In cases, this is a quote, in cases where the religious affiliation of terrorism casualties could be determined, Muslims suffered between 82 and 97% of terrorism-related fatalities over the past 5 years. That is a pretty useful statistic to combat Islamophobia, Andy. Next time some bigoted moron is glaring angrily at a mosque somewhere, it might be worth pointing out to him that Muslims are far more likely to be killed by terrorists than actually be terrorists themselves. Perhaps that might provide some calm to that empty, shaved head. And besides, that bigot might also want to spend a bit less time worrying about threatening-looking Muslims and more time worrying about threatening-looking furniture that statistically might be plotting to kill him one day.
Terrorism is, in fact, as these figures show, one of the least efficient killers of Americans, second only to shark attacks, of which there were only 12 fatalities last year and no American fatalities at all, which rather takes the thrill out of watching Jaws or the Olympic open water swimming race, or indeed, as you suggested, the Queen's Jubilee pageant. That just isn't a risk anymore. There were 29 unprovoked shark attacks in the US in 2009, which is an interesting statistic. Because none of them were fatal. But also, that suggests that they are not counting provoked shark attacks.
Yes, nor should they. Nor should they.
That is the lowest figure since 1998. Who would provoke a shark attack? I mean, that is going too far to impress a girl. If that's what you've got to do, move on. That's the lowest figure since 1998, and it's been blamed, John, on the economic downturn, because it turns out that fewer people are now able to afford a day out at the beach, and this has resulted. So, the global economic catastrophe has some benefits.
Okay.
Let's stop looking at the negative.
Yep.
Let's stop looking at the collapse of Europe and, endemic unemployment across the industrialised world. Let's look at the slightly fewer number of shark attacks in America. It could also, to be fair, be due to sharks living healthier lifestyles and not eating junk food anymore. We just don't know.
You're right, Andy. We should be thanking those bankers, those unregulated bankers. We should be getting on our knees and thanking them that we're not shark food.